Welcome back. Last little video on strings. Apologize that there's so much to learn on strings, but hopefully it's not too confusing so far. Okay, so we've talked about how to print things out, the string library, right? The last thing to do is we want to get strings from the keyboard, okay? And right here, you can see an example of that, right? This read N, STDIN, stands for read N characters from the standard input. Put it in a string called input string, right? And the N is 20 characters. It'll read up to 20, or the first time you hit carriage return. Now that's not from plib, that's something I wrote for you. Okay? If you come over to configure UART, I've written 3 functions, right? Well, a bunch of functions, but the functions we're interested in first starts with this one, read N UART1. We're always using UART2, but it's the same, right? Here's the string, which is actually going to be a string of numbers or characters depending on you, and how long you want to read for. And what it is simply the data ready UART and get character UART functions. But we've put it in a loop to keep collecting as many letters as you want to send in, right? Okay. And in here, if the character you end is character 13, which is the carriage return, then it's going to stop, put in a null character at the end so that it's a string, right? But there's a couple of other things that it does in here. If you use backspace, which is 127, right? It'll let you go forward, backwards, and you're typing in arrays letters. Okay? Now I have a second version of that called read N UART2. That just reads from the UART2 module. Okay? So it's identical to the first, just uses UART2. And then I have this third function, read N standard input, and it simply says use whichever one of those is appropriate based on what the standard input is. Okay, now printf, when we print, it's printing to module 2, the UART module 2, because that's the standard output. Okay? So in here, it simply checks this variable, underscored XC underscore UART, to see if it's a 1 or a 2, right? If it's a 2, then it's the same as read N UART2. If it's not 2, then it must be 1 on this machine. We only have 2 UART modules. You could have more, right? And so it's just checking between the two of them. That's something similar to what I did up here. Wait for enter, right? Okay. Where I'm checking to see which UART module you're using. Are you using 2 or 1 for entering data? Okay, so I know that's a little confusing, but all it's doing is reading a bunch of characters. You tell it how long a string you want using the getCUART function. So let's go back to string input, okay? And we've defined a whole bunch of variables that don't make too much sense yet until we get to here, right? And it's telling you how to acquire something from memory. Okay, so I'm going to go to the menu and show you, right? So here's 20, right? So let's go back to the terminal, press enter to start. There's a message. Type a string. Okay, so I'm going to type a string 1, 2, 3. Oh, didn't want to type 3. I wanted to type 4. Right? Decimal 5, 6, E4, A, B, C. Okay, and I'm happy with that. I'm going to hit enter, see what I get. Okay, so you typed this, right? Yep, it found all my characters. Here's the individual characters and their ASCII numbers. And then it tries to interpret it as numbers for me. Okay, so let's see what it's doing. Okay, so here's the first bit of it, what I typed and what the characters were. Down here are 3 functions from the standard library, right, from in here. And what these functions do is they take a string and convert it either to an integer. So A stands for character, to integer. There's also an A to long, so that's a double-spaced memory for an integer. And the last one is A to float, right? A to F, right? Character to float. And the way these guys work is when you give them a string, they start looking for all the characters. If there's white space, they'll ignore it at the start, right? But not in the middle, right? Okay? And the string I had given it, right? 1, 2, 4, right? The period would be a non-integer character. So A to I stops and says the closest thing this is to is integer 124. Similarly, for a long, right, it would have stopped here. But for a float, right, for a float, a decimal is an okay character. E to the 4, why, that's exponential, right? So it interprets that correctly. But the ABC, that's garbage. It ignores it. And so instead of giving me 124.56E4, it multiplies this by 10 to the 4, right? 0, 0. It gives me. If I wanted it back in this notation, I could have used, where is this? I could have used %E for scientific notation, or %G, which would give me mix, depending. Right? Okay. So these are very useful functions for us. A to I, A to long, A to F. You'll be using them a lot. But they're kind of limited, right? As long as you're entering a string of digits of the appropriate format, it's fine. What if you wanted to do something a little more sophisticated? That's where the second bit comes in. Okay? There's a function in the standard input-output library called scanf, double S scanf. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter. Okay? And it says, if you enter structured data, this function, scanf, can parse it for you. So today is Wednesday. What is today? The 5th, 05, July 2017. I should spell July correctly. Okay. Okay. For some reason I hit enter too quick. Right? And it didn't catch it. But it says, look, your date, you type this, and it's a Wednesday. I'm going to reset this up again. Hit enter, hit enter, hit enter. Try this again. Wednesday, 5 July 2017. Hit enter. There, looks a little better that way, right? So it read in this string and correctly parsed it, broke it up into the appropriate pieces, numbers and strings. Let's go and see how I did that. Okay. So here's the input string I typed, right? And here's the function, scanf. It's a little like printf in format backwards. You put your list of variables here, right? It's your input string, right? And then here it says is a formatting string, right? And it says I want to interpret input string as a string, an integer, a string, an integer, right? And I've created memory space up here for week, day, and month as strings, and integer variables for day and year. So weekday, day, month, year. And then it prints them out. There's something different here though. When I'm working with integers and I'm trying to get scanf to put this in day, I've got to use this ampersand so that day, my variable, gets the number it found. Right? This is called an address variable, right? It's a little more than we want to do in C, but you need it if you're working with integers here. And then it prints it out in printf, right? %d, %s, %d, %s, where I've broken it up and put it in a different order. So scanf, or scanf, it might be useful if we need to break things up in a more complicated way than A2I or A2F. So we can always read a string of characters. Okay? You can read n UART1, read n UART2 if you prefer, rather than read n standard input, string, and how many characters to read. Bye for now.